So,
now we're live, the speaker's on.
all right, so we'll call this meeting to order and introduce, and then I'll give her another moment.
Welcome to our February Finance Committee meeting. We will begin by introducing ourselves. Beginning with Jeff.
Jeff Hanley.
Joanne O'Brien. Molly Rogers. Becky Fless.
Tony B.
Megan Carlson.
Sean Pogue.
Michelle Tucker.
Do you want administration?
Administrative staff, I'm so
Pat
sorry.
Hopkins, superintendent.
Andrea Dish, business manager.
Dave Dostey, facilities director.
Carrie McGuire, Director of Technology.
Sarah Bolduc, Director of Special Services.
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum.
Excellent. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm trying to get in the right account here. Okay, thank
No
you.
worries, I'm still, Google, Adobe has kicked me out and is requiring me to sign in again. So if anything's gonna go wrong today, apparently it's going to be everything.
And it's not even Monday.
No,
Sure. All right.
love Adobe.
So what we're going to do today, we're going to spend some time reviewing the ED 279. ED 279 is the report that is created by the Department of Education that provides our subsidy, our state subsidy. And so Andrea is going to walk us through last year's versus this year's, what are the differences, and she will walk us through the elements of the ED 279 so that everyone kind of understands the basis for which our funding is based upon.
So I'm gonna go over before I start, I'm just gonna go over the documents that you have so that you can follow along. You can use this to share. There. So in your packets, the first thing that you have on top is an ED 279 comparison. It looks just like the document that I'm screen sharing. And then below that, you will see student data, and I will talk about what that is. And then you see two, they're actually ED 279s. One of them is dated 1/27/2025. That is for the FY26 subsidy. And the other one is dated 1/17/24. That is for this year's this year's budget. These are the two documents that we are going to be comparing. And I will walk you through those comparisons. And I've made note of the differences in the comparison, doesn't that? So you can see how things shake out and why we're getting what we're getting in subsidy. So the first thing that I want to go over is that the EPS basically has 2 or 3 purposes. The first is to calculate the total allocation or the defined cost of the school district. It's basically the amount the state, based on the number of students that we have, will agree to base our funding from. So they refer to that as the total allocation. From that total allocation, they will calculate the local contribution, which is based on valuation and a mill rate. And I'll walk you through how that's calculated. And then the final calculation is actually the state subsidy. So the total allocation minus the local contribution equals the state subsidy. And that's how it's calculated. There are additional costs that we have as a district beyond the total allocation. And you'll hear us talk about that through budget time. It's additional foundation allocation, the amount over and above what it costs us to run the district beyond what the state says they're willing to base our subsidy on. I guess that's the best way of putting it. So again, a lot of documents I know, but we're just going to jump in with The FY 26, again, that's the ED 279 dated 1/27/25. And the whole purpose of the first page is to get the EPS per pupil rates in green at the bottom. This isn't where our bucket starts. It is the calculation that is used to create both an elementary and a secondary per pupil rate. And I'm going to walk you through how that is set.
And EPS stands for Essential Programs and Services.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what it's called.
So in section 1, and I'm just going to refer to the 25, and you'll see how it compares to the 24. And I'll stop and show you those changes after I go through each section. The first count is attending students. These are students who are actually attending our schools, as opposed to subsidizable students who actually either reside in the district or which we have a superintendent's agreement. So this count is based on attending. So you will see lines 1, 2, and 3. Line 1 is our October 1st count from 2023. And then you'll see our October 1st count dated 2024, the one that just went by. So the state requires that we count students twice a year, October and April. It's a huge report. Terry does all of the counts for student counts, and I do the staff counts. And we spend about a month working on these two reports because they have a bearing on our subsidy, and we want to make sure that we are able to capture every student and that staff costs are accurate. So in section 1, you'll see the counts broken out, pre-K to K, 1 to 5, 6 to 8, and then you'll see where they add pre-K to 8, and then you'll see 9 to 12, and then you'll see a total. Then you'll see an attending pupils average. They average the 2023 year and the 2024 year to get a 2-year average, so that any sudden movement in either decline or it's really to prevent against decline doesn't affect a district if they were just doing a 1-year enrollment count. So there's a 2-year average. So you see what those are, and based on that 2-year average, you'll see that 69.26% of our students are pre-K to 8, and 30.74% of our students are 9 to 12. Everyone see where I am? In section B is our staff position counts. So these are for regular students only. The staff position counts do not include any special ed, either ed techs or teachers. So we'll go through line 1, teachers. So if you look at line 1, you will see the student to staff ratio for pre-K to K is 15 to 1. So based on that 15 to 1 ratio and the number of pre-K to K students we have, if you divide pre-K to K by 15, we should be allowed 13.23 staff members, excuse me. And then we do the same thing for grades 1 to 5. That count is 17 to 1. So if you look at what our count is for 1 to 5 from up above and divide the average by 17, you will see that the state's allowing us 38.88 staff members for grades 1 to 5 based on our current enrollment. 6 to 8, again, the student to staff ratio is 17 to 1. The total enrollment count for 6 to 8 divided by 17 is at 25.26 staff members based on our current enrollment. For 9 to 12, the student to staff ratio is 16 to 1 based on 572 kids. If you divide that by 16, you will get 35.75 staff members for the number of students we have. If you add up the 13.23, the 38.88, the 25.26, and the 35.75, you will get a total of 113.13 EPS FTE staff members. I'm just going right across the top, okay? The next column is actual FTE. This is the number of staff members that we actually have. So the EPS FTE is 113.13. The actual full-time staff that we are reporting this year is 131.9. So if you divide 113.13 by 131.9, which is the actual FTE, you get a percentage of EPS, which is the 0.86. Everyone see where I am? Okay. The next column is called SAU data and EPS matrix. So the state has a salary matrix that it uses for teacher positions and all the positions that we're discussing in staff positions. That would be in column B. And it's taken all of our staff based on their experience and their degree and put them into their salary matrix, okay? When they did that, they got their grand total was 8,273,199. The adjusted staff matrix is the SAU data matrix multiplied by the 0.86 because we have more staff members than they think we should, okay? So then you get the adjusted EPS salary of 7,095,923, okay? They break that into elementary and secondary based on the percentages above. So remember the 69.26 for pre-K to 8 and the 30.74% for secondary. I am not going to go through every single staff position in B. You can see how I went through that. And it's the same across the board unless somebody wants me to go through all the different staff. Pat?
I
You
do have one
good?
question.
Go ahead.
The number, the 8,273,000, the state came up with that number. So they have a formula that, we don't need to know that formula.
So they have a salary matrix and they've taken all the staff members that I reported on my NEO staff report. And in that report, we give them information about experience and degree. They have information on all our staff. They put all of our regular staff members into their matrix. And when they do that, this is the amount that they get.
So it's behind a curtain, they do it, they come back with a number.
We have access to their salary matrix. I can share that with you. But yes, that's what they're doing. They are ignoring the amount that I reported that we're paying the staff and they're using their salary matrix.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
And remind me, the student to staff ratios, those are state set too, right? What they expect it should, like, the average should be?
They are definitely, they are
Okay,
what the
those are not
model.
our, yeah.
Correct.
Mhm. And there are times that they have changed those in the past.
Yeah.
But this is where they are currently.
Mhm.
So the staff positions that are covered in section B are teachers, guidance, which also includes social workers, librarians. This is a teacher, library specialist, not an ed tech librarian. Health, which are your nurses. Education techs, which are your regular district ed techs, again, does not include any special ed techs. Library techs, these are our ed tech 3 library aides. Clerical, which are the administrative assistants to the principal. And school administrators, which are your your principal and your assistant principal. It also includes your athletic director. Okay?
No. Are ours so much higher because we have so many elementary schools?
In some of these numbers, yes, because we have multiple elementary schools, it means that we have multiple people filling those positions, so yes.
So looking at the ED 279 comparison before I move on, you will see, and I'm just going to go through section A and B. You will see with attending students from the last ED 279 to this one, there's a pre-K to K decrease of 8.5 students. Everyone with me? Grades 1 to 5, there was actually a 2.5 student increase. For grades 6 to 8, we're down 18.5 attending students. For grades 9 through 12, we're down 27 students for a total decrease in attending students of 51.5. The staff positions, so in B elementary, I have gone through and compared the amount in the elementary this year's bucket to last year's, and that's how it shakes out. So you'll see for elementary teachers, last year's to this year's, there's an increase of 33,827. Everyone see where I am? And then I did the same thing for secondary below, so that you can see where the plus and minuses are. Okay. In the next section, it's computation of benefits, and it's based on, again, the positions above in section B. So this is where they throw additional money in based on a percentage that they give us for benefits. So you'll see for teachers, guidance, librarians, and health, they have added up the amount in each of those positions from the chart above, and then multiplied that by 26%. So you'll see for, if you add it up, like I said, teachers, guidance, librarians, and health, you would get a total salary cost of $5,414,103 multiplied by 26%. It calculates to $1,407,667. Everyone see where I am? Okay. The same thing with secondary. The percentage for ed techs and librarians, the percentage is 40%, and you can see how that shakes out. 40% for clerical and 21% for administrators. And you can see again on the first page, close to the bottom, computation of benefits. Again, I showed you how we compared to last year for section C, both elementary and secondary. The next section is section D, which is per pupil costs. So in this section, they are giving you an amount per pupil, K 9-12, for half-day substitute teachers. So the cost per half-day is $52 for each, multiplied by the total number of elementary students, which is 1,289, again from section 1 above, and you can see where they get that calculation. The secondary students, again, $52 for half-day subs times 572. Secondary students calculates to 29,744. So, whoops, sure I can. Not too much on my screen.
Oh, sorry, just trying to scroll it up for anyone who's watching.
Okay. You're welcome. So other support per pupil costs, Supplies and equipment, 433 per pupil. Elementary, 589 per pupil for secondary. You see that in the bucket. Professional development, $74 per student regardless of elementary or secondary. Instructional leadership support, 36 per pupil for both elementary and secondary. Co and extracurricular student activities, it's 48 per student for elementary and 144 for secondary. The system administration support, it's 135 per student regardless, and for operations and maintenance, it's 1267 elementary and 1504 secondary. So you get those totals. In section E, the regional adjustment for staff and substitutes salaries. They basically, the state has the map of Maine in salary zones. With, I believe, Portland being the equivalent of 1, and everyone else is either plus or minus 1 for being out of the Portland market. I know I'm not explaining myself very well, but it's basically regions where they see salaries being offered. So because we're not in Portland and because they don't think that we offer the same salaries as the schools in Portland, or
I think it's kind of like a cost of living. So
Right.
that's what they're looking at, is a cost of living. And in areas where the cost of living is higher, you need to have a higher salary.
But
So
it-
they will be given
yeah,
a percentage above 1, right?
but it's not
Versus-
tied to COLA. It's really tied to these salary districts throughout the state. And honestly, after COVID, I think the state really needs to look at it because we're all paying a lot more for everyone. So again, because they see us not being in one of those districts or in that area that pays the most, there's an adjustment. So you can see a $320,000 and change adjustment for elementary and $142,000 adjustment for and change for secondary. And then basically you're just totaling both of these columns down, and the total is being divided by the average number of students from the top. And based on that, you're getting an elementary rate of $8,039 per student, $8,538 per secondary student. It compares to last year. Our elementary student per student rate is actually increased to $38.03, and the secondary student rate is actually increased over last year by $251.02. So, it looks like we're doing really good, right? So I want you to forget about everything we've talked about so far, because the only two pieces of information that you need to think about are the two figures that I just mentioned, the elementary and the secondary rate. And I'm going to talk to you about how those come into play in the next section.
One question.
Sure.
In section D, in the first column, pre-K, and then the second column, 9 to 12, those numbers are created by the state.
They set them every year.
No.
And just so that you're aware, the ED 279 that we're reviewing is available to anyone on the state's website. If you just typed in a browser MDOE ED 279, you would find a page where you could see every single ED 279 for every school district in the state. And not only can you see every district, but you're able to see prior years as well. So anybody can look at what we're looking at. Anyway. So page 2 is really where we start creating a brand new pot of money. And on this page, we're not looking at attending students, we're looking at subsidizable students. Students who, again, live in the school district, It also includes those students in which there's a superintendent's agreement in place. I will let Pat just touch on the superintendent's agreement and how though they work as opposed to like a tuition student.
Sure, we'll receive requests from families to either have their child attend our district or have their child attend a different district for just an array of reasons, that for whatever reason, they believe that it's a better fit. It could be that they've just moved, their child is a junior in high school and they don't want to move their child for the last couple of years, and they will make these requests. So they happen quite frequently. We have probably as many students that we release that we receive. It's usually pretty balanced. And I don't remember off the top of my head, probably in the vicinity of 40 students that are released, 40 students that come here,
Yep.
roughly.
So unlike tuition students, we don't charge these districts for these students. Instead, we get to count them in our ED 279 subsidy allocation. So that is the exchange, as opposed to tuition students that are counted on page 1. For example, we receive a lot of tuition students, grades 9 through 12 from RSU 12. Those students are not counted as our subsidizable students. However, we are charging them tuition. So it's a different arrangement, okay? So in section 1, again, subsidizable student superintendent transfers. You will see the October 23 count from last year as well as the October 24 count. And then you will see a subsidizable pupils average. And then in section B, it's what they call basic counts. So pre-K pupils, for whatever reason, they don't use a 2-year average for pre-K. It's only the current year only. So you will see, instead of using the average on line 3 in section A, they actually use line 2 in section A. So there's 79 students, and then it's multiplied by the 8,039 per pupil from the elementary rate from page 1. And you will see that they have thrown $635,081 in our new bucket for pre-K pupils. K to 8 pupils, we have 1,211. You can see that from the average above, again, multiplied by the elementary rate, 9,735,000 and change into the bucket again, and so on and so forth. Adult education courses at point 1. These are students who are that are reported on our student count that Terry picks up from adult ed. They are students who are of school age who are accessing adult ed for credit. And they have to be enrolled a certain percentage for it to count. And as you can see, we have 9.4 students. Multiplied by the secondary rate, it throws 80,257.20 in the bucket. Pre-K to K equivalent instructional pupils, again, that is the most recent October only. So there are no pre-K students who are homeschooled who are accessing the district for a portion of their day. Does that make sense? So you may have a homeschool student who comes in and picks up math or may participate in art. So those are the kinds of students that we're talking about when we're talking about equivalent instructional pupils. So there are no pre-K. K to 8, we have 0.750 students at the elementary rate. And at the secondary level, 9 to 12, there are 0.375. And that only represents a portion of the day that they're accessing times the secondary rate. Everyone with me? Before I move forward, I just wanted to I wanted to jump back up to section 2 and just go over the subsidized pupil per pupil counts as opposed to last year. So on page 2 of the purple sheet that I gave you, and I probably need to change. When like you, like.
Oh, is this?
Yeah,
Oh, last year. That was purple.
sorry.
It was actually purple, right? I know.
Page 2?
It's actually section 2, page 3. And you want to be at the top.
Not sure which one.
Sorry, it looks like the one on the screen, this document, and if you just flip to page 3, it says at the bottom, section 2, page 3 over to the right. I know, it's a lot of information. So we're just going over, again, I'm just taking the top of this ED 279, and I just wanted to go over with you how our subsidized pupil counts compare to last year. So I'm hopping back up. So for our 4-year-old pre-K, there's a difference of 7 students less than last year. The 4-year-old attending average, there's 1. So that's an increase of 1 rather. K-8 attending average, there's a decrease of 27.5 students, and 9 to 12 subsidizable. It's again 27.5. So we've actually lost 54 students this year. And I want you to see that because it's going to come into conversation later when we start talking about our subsidy. Well, we're talking about it now, but anyway. So going back down to section C, weighted counts, these are where the state gives additional monies for certain things. So the first certain thing that it gives additional weighted counts is the pre-K, well, it's actually for disadvantage. It's your free and reduced, basically your free and reduced, or your alternative form that we used this year. And what I will say is I am happy that our free and reduced numbers actually increased. That weight increased from last year. And I'm going to tell you the way that it's calculated. So in years past, the free and reduced number is based on applications from kindergarten to grade 8. They don't include high school because high school students, they were poor about returning the forms, so they are not included in the calculation. So if you add up your pre-K, October 1st only, plus your average K to 6, actually your average K to 8, and you get all those students from above. And then you divide by the number of pupils that you see. So if in line 1, sorry, it's a lot. Section C, line 1, you'll see 35.6 students. You will, if you add those students up, you will get our free and reduced number, which is 0.4505. So again, pre-K, current year, and then if you add K through 8, and then divide by the applications for pre-K through 8, then you'll get that 0.4505 figure, and it calculates correctly because I've checked it. So anyway, the weight per student, 35.6 students is the weight, and the EPS weight is 0.15 times the elementary rate is, there's an additional 42,000 in the bucket. Same thing with K through 8, the 0.4505. Students times the 0.15 times the elementary rate is 657,000 in the bucket. Same thing for 9 through 12. The next weight is for multilingual learners. So you will see that we have 10 students K to 8 and 2 students 9 through 12. The EPS weight that the state uses is 0.7. If you multiply those by the respective elementary and secondary rates, you'll see the amount that they've thrown in the district budget. The next section is targeted funds. They give additional funds for specific needs. The first need is assessment. So you will see that for the pupils that we have from section 1, they throw an EPS targeted amount of 56 per student. And then they multiply that by the number of students, and you will see that for pre-K student assessment, they've thrown in $4,424. The same with K-8 and 9-12. They also throw in additional funds for technology resources. You will see that they throw in $123 per student for pre-K through 8 and $369 for 9 through 12 students, the number of students that we have. And they throw that into the bucket. The next section is pre-K pupils through 2. There's targeted funds for those students because of lower class sizes and additional supports that are needed at that level. You will see that there's an EPS weight of 0.1 for those students, and that money is thrown in based on the number of students we have. And then there's also a disadvantage targeted again based on the number of students from above. You will see another weight of 0.05 multiplied by elementary, secondary, respectively, again, tossed into the bucket. The next two calculations are isolated small school adjustment for pre-K and 9-12, neither of which applies to us. So you get a total operating allocation of $17,342,946.32. So there. And if you look at the comparison sheet, you will see how we compare in all the areas that I just mentioned to last year's ED 279 to see where we're up and we're down. Okay, questions?
This is the amount of money that we get from the state.
It is starting to create a bucket. It's starting to create a calculation. Yep. But we don't necessarily get all of it, and you'll see as we work through it what I mean by that. So on page and the pages aren't numbered, section 3 of the ED 279 that we're working on, it says other allocations, other subsidizable costs. The first thing you'll see is line 1, gifted and talented, which we also refer to REACH. The base year expenditures were $219,232.77. And basically those are the expenditures that I reported that we spent. Angela, you looking up? Do you want me to move something? There we go.
Done.
And they basically take an inflation adjustment of 102.6, and they just plus up our base year, which is the last audited year. The next up subsidizable cost is special education. And what I want you to know is that the special education EPS allocation is a 7-step formula. And it's based on, and I'm not going through it because if you think this glazes you over, the special ed allocation would really glaze you over. It's basically based on a prevalence rate. I will share it with you so that you can see where the information comes from. It's based on the prevalence rate of special ed students in our district, actually of every district in the state. The prevalence rate that the state sets is 15%. So if your district is above, so for the first 15% of students, they give you a large bump based on those special ed students. Any students over and above the prevalence rate of 15 are weighted at 0.38, which is very different than the 1.2, 1.4. So you'll see, once you hit that prevalence rate, you get far less per special ed student. And then there are other calculations that are taken into account. So they look to see if you are billing for Medicare, and if you are, that is actually subtracted out of a portion of the formula. So for those of us who aren't billing for main care, Medicaid, then you will see how that affects, but it's a net, we net out the same. So for those districts that are billing, it's actually reduced from their special ed formula. So there's a calculation there that's based on, again, previous year's expenditures, the number of students we have, and EPS, high cost out of districts. So we get additional monies for those students that cost more than four times the rate that the state sets for those. So if we have a student, let's say the state rate is 25,000. So if you are paying more than 100,000 for the student, they will throw back in the amount over 100,000 that we are paying for out of district placements. Questions? I know this is confusing. It's just, I'm trying to take something that is probably 6 sheets long and frame it in a way that you have a basis of understanding without dragging you through the entire calculation.
Is main care dollar for dollar if we were doing that, or is it?
So yes, so if we have main care revenues, it comes right off the top. Yep. The reason that we don't, and we've talked about this before, the reason that we don't bill for main care Medicaid is because the state of Maine does not have a school-based Medicaid billing. And years ago, when the state was doing Medicaid main care audits, they were auditing school districts, and we were one of the school districts that they audited. And we were found not to be in compliance. But I want you to know that every district in the state would not have been in compliance because we're using a medical-based billing and they're trying to apply it to a school-based setting. So the state has been trying for years to redo their Medicaid billing policy. And as long as I've been here, they haven't done that. So when they did the audit of the district, we were actually fined. And at that time, the board made a decision that we were no longer going to bill for Medicaid until the state fixed its issue, which it hasn't done. But you will see, what I just mentioned, by not billing for Medicaid, it doesn't affect us because the districts that are billing for Medicaid, it's coming off the top of their calculation. Okay, questions?
Yeah. We bumped up the reserve for these kinds of students from, was it 300,000 to 700,000?
Yep, you have money sitting in a reserve account that is helping to fund the district. So far this year, we haven't had the need to access it. So that is still sitting there. It's set aside separately from your carryover. It's in a special ed reserve account and it's reserved just for special ed.
Okay, so this would be additional monies that we would be getting into our budget that we don't necessarily have to.
So the monies that we're talking about here on this calculation it's again adding into the state subsidy. So it's adding into the amount that they're calculating based on our number of pupils and our expenditures and our students. That they're throwing in our total allocation, the calculation of our total allocation. I don't know how to better explain it. They're creating
Yes,
an amount for us, and this is what goes into it.
okay,
Okay.
which can change it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Okay. So I talked a few minutes ago about the special ed high district out of allocation. So you'll see there's an additional 247,000 thrown into our bucket, for lack of a better term. Transportation is another area that has its own funding spreadsheet. I will share that with you if I haven't already in that in the drive. It's on the state website. Basically, there's two calculations. One of them is based on your expenditures, and they do a 0.9% and a point. They take your expenditures and they multiply by a minimum and a maximum, and then they compare it based on an old transportation model of the miles in your district. And basically you get, unlike the special ed calculation where they give you the most in comparison, for the transportation allocation, they give you the least amount. So they compare these three figures and they will give you the least of the three figures. I will share those with you in the background. But for us, it's not based on the miles driven. It's based on our expenditures from the previous year at the minimum of 0.9, and that is what they've thrown in our bucket. So you can see that is 1,877,720 and whatever it is. And then what it does is it adds, where am I? So in this section, they've added all of the costs that I just discussed. You will see the approved bus allocation, where 0. For those who are wondering, we do not own our buses. We lease them from year to year. We find that beneficial. We do not have to employ mechanics. We do not have to have a garage. We do not have to stock tires. We don't have to stock engines and whatnot for repairing our buses. This has worked for us. So we do not have an approved bus allocation. And when the time comes for us to renew our bus lease, we can talk about that in greater detail. But we've been doing this for years. Section B is the teacher retirement amount normalized cost. So they basically throw in an amount for main PERS. So teachers in the district do not participate by statute, do not participate in Social Security. In lieu of contributing to Social Security, they contribute to main PERS. The district does not contribute to Social Security for teacher members, and by teacher members, I mean teachers, administrators, ed techs 2s and 3s, and that's pretty much it. Everyone else in the district is Social Security. So that is the teacher retirement amount. So the total adjusted operating allocation, which is the total from page 2 and this page, is $24,205,038, and my contact's getting funky.
51 cents.
There you go. Thank you very much. In the next section, which is D, debt service. If you look at my comparison, you will see that we have lost $53,760 for approved lease. So those of you on finance have heard me talk about the monies that the state put towards our modular, and that they would reimburse us for 5 years of lease costs, the last of which was last year. So we are no longer getting the subsidies for the lease, the lease at the Pittston, the modular, one of the modulars at Pittston School. So there's a reduction there compared to last year. Questions about? I've got too many pages. So on the next page, we see, just want to make sure. We see in section A, our subsidizable pupils, again, students who live in who live in the districts, and it excludes superintendent's transfers. It's just subsidizable pupils for each of our 4 communities. So you see Gardner has 753.5 students. Hold on, Angela, before you ask, I'll flip this. 753.5 students. Pittston has 342.5 students. Randolph has 167.0 students. And West Gardner has 537.5 students for a total of 1,800.5 students. And then you see the percentage based on each community. So then what the state does is it takes the total allocation, and if the communities had to pay for education in its entirety, the amount that it would actually cost each of the 4 communities based on the number of students that live in their district. In section B, you see state valuation by each of our municipalities. This is a 3-year valuation. And what I will say in this section, and if you look at the ED 279 comparison, our subsidies, our valuations have increased quite a bit, significantly. And if you look at section 4, page 5 of the ED 279 comparison, you will see this. I've also included in your packets a sheet that says at the top, state valuation, main revenue. I've only given it to you for Kennebec County so that you could see what the valuation for each community is based on main revenue. And according to state statute, the ED 279 is required to use the main revenue valuation and not the local valuation, which is why I printed it off. I've highlighted each of our 4 communities. And this figure that you see on the ED 279, it's a 3-year average of the years 24, 23, and 22. Again, to mitigate any huge changes from year to year, they use an average. So you will see where our valuations are really increasing, which is part of the reason why we're not receiving as much in subsidy as we otherwise would be. So the huge factor is valuation.
So, sorry, the comparison has the state valuation and you provided the county valuation, the local on the separate.
So in section B, what you see is the 3-year average.
Yep.
I gave you the backup of how they got that average. I wanted you to see.
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
So in section B, it takes the 3-year valuation and it multiplies by the state set mill expectation of 6.10. And while the mill expectation actually decreases from last year to this year, because the valuation has increased so much, you're actually raising more money this year with a reduced mill rate. Do you see where I am? So the ED 279 comparison again. So let's see. I can show it to you on this because it's easier to see on. So section 4, page 5 of my document near the bottom, you will see that you'll see the 3-year average for last year and this year. So for instance, Gardner, even though the mill rates reduced, they are required to raise an additional $178,204. Do you see where I am?
Yeah.
Pittston's required to raise an additional $109,858. Randolph, $36,174, and West Gardner, $210,607. And that's based on just what's happening with valuations, state valuations. So, going back to the ED 279, the contribution again, by community. Let's see where we are. So the way that the state contribution is calculated is the total allocation. Remember where I said where we got the $24 million figure? And they basically subtract out the total of the local contributions of the 4 communities. And the
8,193,000.
Yep.
Okay.
And the difference is what we get from the state. So because our valuation is increasing, we are getting less. The other driver in this formula is enrollment. Our enrollment numbers are decreasing. Those are the 2 big drivers in this calculation. So you see the adjusted state contribution. The local share is 33.85% and the state share is 66.15%. And they do this calculation to determine minimum receivers. So there are certain communities or school districts that are actually able to raise more than in their valuation than the amount that the state would otherwise require them to contribute. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in their valuation alone, they can raise the entire amount of their total allocation. And when you can do that, you become a minimum receiver. And this doesn't apply to you as much. Instead of getting the amount in here, you get what's called, you're a minimum receiver, and there's a different calculation, and I don't know how they calculate it. We have never been a minimum receiver. While our valuations are increasing, our 4 towns cannot, based on valuation alone, raise the entire amount of 24 million. So that is not us. So that is why they go through this exercise. And then they keep doing the same thing over and over. So what you need to glean from this is that the local contribution that is required for the state to pay its share is the 8.1 million and change. And our subsidy is the 16 million, which is actually 192,000 less than 819.75 less than we received this year. So our subsidy is actually being reduced. Yeah. And there are just more calculations of the same. There's the only other thing that you could possibly glean from this is on the last page is our monthly payout, but it's really not important. That's the monthly amount that we get for subsidies. So every month the state sends us 1/12. It is reduced throughout the year based on main care seed money. So 4 times a year, these special purpose private schools will bill the state for services for for Medicare related students who are in special purpose private school settings. And if you remember with Medicaid, main care, sorry, that trips me up every time, in order for the feds to pay their share, the state has to pay a share as well. And in this situation, instead of the state paying the share of the main care student, the district is required to pay the share in order to get the federal share. So basically they reduce it from our subsidy throughout the year. So even though they say this is what we're going to receive, those payments are come out of our subsidy. We mitigate that by budgeting an amount in our budget for main care seed money, knowing that this is what they're going to do. And what I will say to you is I can see that our main care seed monies, the amount that we're having to pay is increasing significantly compared to years past. So it's increasing. Questions? Wow. Either I've done a really good job or none of you know what to say.
Do you have an estimate for that amount that we're gonna have to plan for, the main care?
So it's a moving target based on the students we send for special purpose private school placements. It's based on whether they're main care eligible, and it's based on the services that they need. So it's a moving target. Every year, the special ed director and I talk about what we're seeing and how it's trending, and we'll decide something from there.
Is that reimbursed in next year's special ed allocation?
Those are actually, so when I talked about the special ed formula and our expenditures, those amounts that we pay are actually going into the special ed formula for a subsequent year. So yes. Okay. I'm not sure where you want me to go from here.
We're good if no one has
Questions?
questions. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. It absolutely is.
No, it is a lot.
We hear this every year, right? But every year we walk away with, oh, now I get this piece in this section, but it's a lot.
There's always
It's
a new
lot
nugget to
absorb.
get somewhere.
You know,
Well, next year with the valuation having gone up to 600,000, that's concerning.
so one of the things, I've shared several reports with you in the folder. Some of them are very interesting. And just because I've gone over so much with you in the ED 279, you can see in the folder, the Google Docs folder, you will see valuation, basically valuation and enrollment and how it affected every school district within the state. You will see, there's another report that I've given you that you can see how much each school district within the state, whether they gained or whether they lost subsidy. I've actually included several, I think they're very interesting. You know, I like to see where we compare to other districts, you know, and I would, you know, if you need some good sleeping material, I would suggest that you just peruse it. Again,
Hang
I
on,
find it
policies are
interesting.
saved for that.
Yeah, so policies are saved for that, so.
Yeah, for late
There's
night.
some good material there that
Yeah.
the state provides. But if anybody has additional questions, really wants to deep dive in, please know that you can reach out and we'll talk about additional calculations that maybe I didn't go into, but feel free. Sorry.
Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Andrea, you're the next one as well.
Yep. Hang tight. So, let's see. It seems like this conversation keeps getting kicked down the road. So the conversation is the Pittston Randolph modular, and it's part of the conversation that we just had. So we talked about in finance that last year was the last year that, actually this year was the last year that the state was subsidizing the financing of the reimbursement of our modular at Pittston. And the finance committee discussed purchasing the modular that we do not own. So basically there are two modulars at Pittston, one that we purchased with federal Easter monies, and the other that the older of the two modulars, we have been leasing since we closed TC Hamlin School. So because we are no longer receiving subsidy from the state in our allocation, I brought it back to the finance committee to ask them if they wanted to look into purchasing this modular. And the answer was yes. So I reached out to Schiavi /Box, and I got a purchase price from them. The board voted on purchasing the modular. We did everything that we needed to do, and I was reaching out to them for an invoice. And the person, not the person that I was dealing with, but his wife, who's also involved in the company, said, we can't do that. There have been changes in company policies, and I think I shared that email with you, I want to say either November or December. So it kind of put us on our heels. We actually went through the process of securing a lease, an agreement to lease purchase. And when I say lease purchase, it's basically to purchase to own. In governmental borrowing, it's called lease purchase. It's always to own anyway. So at that point, it's been kicking, or since that point that I gave you the news, it's been kicking around in the hands of council, trying to figure out what to do. I've been sharing with them, or I shared with them my communications with Schiavi/Box, asking them how they would suggest we proceed. So I'm coming to you to let you know the advice. They've looked through the contract, they looked through the emails, and what they are suggesting that we do is that we issue payment to Box Modular for the $286,350, and that we send it to them. And then we let the lawyers hash it out. I have not had any communication with Schiavi, with Box, since the original email telling us that they couldn't move forward with the lease purchase. I'm not sure how they would respond. They could not cash the check. And then their lawyers and our lawyers, we could end up spending monies for our lawyers to hash it back and forth. Or they could accept it. I don't know what they will do. I have not told them what our intentions are, and I couldn't move forward without guidance from you. At this point, our previous lease purchase has been canceled because of we can't take control of the modular. So if they actually cash the check, we will have to go through the purchase. We'll have to go through the process again of actually financing the $286,000 that we're going to issue the check for, but I don't want to go through the process of beginning the financing process if they're not going to cash the check. So at this point, I am coming to you, asking you how you would like for us to proceed.
Can we have a memorandum on that check saying payment in full for that particular?
I can, they are not asking, they are not in agreement to sell it to us. So I'm sure when they open the mail and get the check, I'm sure they'll have a lot of questions. At that point, I will advise them to reach out to our attorney, and I'm just going to let legal argue this. If that is the way that you want to proceed, then we can move forward. If you want to drop it and just continue moving on a month-by-month lease basis, they said that in their email that I received back in December, that after it's so many years old, that we could look at purchasing the modular once it's, I want to say 10 years old. We could revisit the conversation, but their new company policy forbids them from selling a modular that is less than, I want to say 10 years old. And there are two people who are running this company, and apparently the two people, the husband and wife, were not communicating. I was communicating with one.
Did they imply an agreement to sell though?
That is exactly what the attorneys, they think that we have grounds for a contract, which is why the attorney is saying that if you want to push it, that we should issue a payment, and then they will argue what constitutes a contract.
Is an email a legal contract?
I think based on the advice of counsel that what they see in the email exchanges, that it constitutes a contract. The question is, how much are you willing to spend for the lawyers to fight this out?
Well, money talks. I mean, once they get a check, they might glow a little bit, say, well, one in the hand is better than two in the bush, right?
I think the problem is that it's a national company. So Schiavi's national and the local branch. So I think there's a higher company policy that she sees them having to.
Well, that's between them and their national.
Yeah, they have to pay the same attorney.
You could always get Channel 6 to come up and do a special on this big company putting the screws to the school district, right? Like a little good PR to fix things.
Nothing like it. That's not a bad plan. Did they ever notify you that they'd had a policy change within their company?
Not until I asked for the final so in order for us to
Right.
process the lease purchase, I needed an invoice and I reached out. And that is when, it was a Friday at night, I received an email saying, yeah, we can't do this and this is why. And I shared that email
Right.
with you.
Was that in the original lease agreement that after 10 years,
No,
so there was nothing
no.
that's silent that way?
So the attorneys have everything that I have, including the original lease agreement that we signed, and the subsequent one that we signed. And I've given them all of my communications with them regarding over the past, not only 1, but 2 years. We had originally talked about it before, and Schiavi and I had conversations about their willingness to sell. So they've been willing to sell until the point that I asked them for the invoice, and that's when we were notified that they could not sell based on company policy.
Does legal have a estimate of how much it would cost us to go into this wrestling match?
Well, look, if we don't start pushing back on a lot of things, it's gonna cost us more in the long run. So I think if we get a notice saying, hey, look, we had a contract, you may not think it's a contract, but it's a contract, and we're gonna fight you on this. Then it becomes incumbent on them, how much do they wanna spend on legal to fight us rather than taking the money and saying, okay, let's make it a wash. But, we have legal for a reason, and if we're not gonna use them to actually take care of us, then what's the point?
And what invoice do we act on now, sending the check? Essentially the
I'm
emails?
just going to issue a check from
Okay.
the budget, and if they cash it, then we'll have to back around and do the financing, but the figure that, based on the communications, they gave us, and if you remember the communication, there was another much higher figure that they said that they could sell it for, which was much higher than the 286,000, and I think at that time, we decided that we were not going to go down that road. If you remember, we had that conversation in December. It was almost twice the 286,000, or significantly more than, I wouldn't say twice.
So I might recommend that you act on the advice of legal counsel for the time being and then see what happens. If the immediate response from the company is never, then it can come back to you and then you can decide that question about legal fees, how much, do you want to push this or not?
And when to call Channel 6.
I have a question. I guess I'm not understanding. Why would we just issue a check? Like, if they cash it, then we have to fight. It is an alternative, maybe cutting the check and having it and saying to the lawyers, we have this money set aside, here it is, we can show the company, but we don't actually give the check in their hands. That's a lot of money. So
if they cash it, then they've accepted the contract.
Correct.
And I understand that. But
check-
we say that, but could they fight it?
The check is a way of trying to force the sale. That is that is the next step, to try to force the sale based on the unwritten contract in the emails. So their promise to sell, the attorney's view as a contract. So we're going to try to enforce that it's unwritten contract or the agreement.
If we send the check and send payment,
Mhm.
we no longer have to send a monthly payment.
Correct.
But if we cut a check, set it aside, we have to continue to
still-
make a
yeah.
monthly payment
Mhm.
and hold this money aside
Good point.
and make the same argument.
Correct.
Okay. Nothing questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
There is
Appreciate it.
no way to force the sale without giving them a check.
No.
Okay.
They'll just say, make me. So nothing talks like a little money.
$250,000.
Or $250,000. A little money to them.
Will we prevent you getting financing as
I've already
Right,
spoken
okay.
to Gorham Leasing and told them that things are in the work and that I may be around, maybe back for round two.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Are we taking a motion?
Motion to approve the lawyer's advice.
You're not part of the finance, it has to be from a finance committee member.
Sorry.
A motion to follow the advice of our attorney.
Follow the advice of the attorney and send a check to the
The second.
modular people.
Thank you, Jeff. And hope they cash it. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Can I vote too or no?
No, only finance committee members. Excellent, thank you.
So before Gabe starts in on EMC, I just want to let you know in the folder that I shared, I again provided a copy of the EMC report. And there's also a copy of in Google Drive. And there's also a copy of the email from Greg M. regarding the project that when I was not here at the last finance, just I don't know that it was discussed, and there are just things that I want to make sure that everyone's aware of.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the next item is the energy management and report and that whole presentation. So following the last meeting, committee members wanted to spend a little more time analyzing the capital improvement plan that was provided to us from EMC, and all of the committee members and other board members who wanted a copy came by the central office and got one so that they had time to review it. So following the meeting, Gabe went and met with Tom Seekins to really look at the program that he shared with you. Agreed to share it with us as long as we do not distribute it at all and we only use it for the purpose of this conversation. So Gabe is going to kind of lead this conversation for us tonight. And the purpose is for you to discuss and determine as a finance committee as to whether you wish to move forward with any of the projects that they outlined. And as a reminder, they outlined, like, I don't know, there's in the document, there's like $35 million worth of projects, but they prioritized them.
165 different projects across the district.
And so are there any that you were interested in moving forward? And in order to do the financing that, Andrea has really been talking about as well, they have to be energy efficiency projects. They can't be just other projects, okay? There has to be a direct linkage there. So Gabe, is there anything you wanted to start with? I'm gonna turn this over to you.
Yeah, so basically, obviously this is a huge list. to help, I can break it down maybe in any way you would like to see it. There's 3 different priorities that are listed there. Like priority ones are the first items that they felt that we should look at. Most of them are critical, say ventilation, those sort of items. And so they broke it down, so I can break it down by priority, so you can see all the red priority items. One thing I did look at, they had it broken down into phases, so I can pick on the side and there's 17 phase 1 items, and you can see they're all priority 1 in this column, they're red priority 1. And then basically you take all the items, you bring it over into what they call their option builder. So phase 1, 17 items. This is the finance number, which again, can be changed to whatever it might be, but right now they looked 4.10% is what they based it on. The 17 is the number of years they based the financing on. So if we did all of phase 1, which again, these are the 17 items listed, it's $4.4 million worth of projects. Andrea had mentioned some of these items are not necessarily energy saving projects. So there was a question that they all had to meet energy saving requirements. So I just took basically and assigned them to another column. These again are all of the projects from phase 1 that they looked at, but there are 7 projects that meet energy savings that they had specified. So I pulled all the projects out of phase 1. There are 7 projects, which brings it to just over $2 million worth of projects that meet energy savings. If you look down through them, a lot of them are, I believe all of them hit the lighting projects at the different schools. I know it's hard to see. I tried to blow it up as large as
Gabe?
possible, but
Did you bring those pieces of paper for us?
yeah, so sorry. If you want to pass this is what EMC had separated them out into the different phases. They are hard to see because they're all crammed in there. I tried to put it on the largest possible paper.
It's the same one that they handed out last.
Yes, I just tried to pack it up a little bit bigger. It was on even smaller paper.
It's all impossible.
That,
It is.
Yeah, this is the same one they handed out last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you may already have a copy of it. I did print some more copies.
Thank you.
Again, I can break it down in any different way. Or even select different items.
You like the colored dots.
So,
Right, so again, priority 1, if you listed it out, priority 1, there are a lot, 69 different projects. Yep.
so Gabe, question for you. Can you go back to the page where you had phase 1 and then phase 1
Yep.
energy efficiency?
Yep.
Okay, right there. If you scroll down. Can you scroll down so I can, or scroll up?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to go to the top. Okay, I can see where you clearly have the difference in the price. The next 3 lines, however, okay, are identical. So the second one, there is rebates.
Right, because it captured all the rebates.
So you're saying that all the rebates that are in the regular phase 1, that
Being
same total would apply to just the energy efficiency only?
Yeah,
The same with the savings for the construction?
Yep.
And that the down payment would be the same, right? Do you have isn't the down payment
yeah, I
the
see the down
same?
payment. I'm
So,
not sure why that would change. I'm not sure what the down payment's based on. That's not one of the questions I had asked them. That could be because of efficiency main funding. That potentially could be what that is.
okay, but you're certain that the rebates and the construction
Yes.
plus year 1, those numbers are
Yep.
identical?
Yep. Yep, because it captured all the energy savings from that phase one. So it brought them all over.
So the annual contribution, that is what would be budgeted every year?
Yep.
The
Right.
87,000.
Gabe,
Seven.
Gabe, that's based on a 17-year
that.
term.
Yes, it is.
If we're looking at doing new buildings, and Pat says the earliest we could have one is maybe 10
And
years,
that's
what
right.
would that look like? What would our annual payment look like with a 10-year term?
Okay. So, so I can do that, it's just gonna take me a minute. So if you go back to the project builder, we were looking at all phase one items. And so there's the 17 project, 17, I just need to deselect some of these.
And it would be under the financing comparison? On the
So-
bottom?
So I can tell you what it's going to be with. So this is, so you wanted 10 years?
Yeah, yep.
10 years. So this is gonna be for all of phase one. For some reason, it's not allowing me to. Let me just run the calculation. Sorry, I think I'm gonna assign it to this column.
Sorry, Gabe.
So, no, it's fine. So column 3, for some reason, it wouldn't let me pick select items. So if we did all of phase one projects at 10 years, which is this third column, we get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, that's,
Sorry. So again, this would be phase one, 10 years. Phase one, 10 years.
It'd be 425,000.
too much.
That's all, that's
Yeah,
not
that's
the
all of them.
energy saving.
Right, so instead of the 231, 635, you'd be talking 425
Hmm.
per year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's large difference. Let me see if I go back to this. Select these. This. Right.
And the only reason that I suggested 10 is in the event that we had a new school, that we wouldn't be paying for a project for buildings that we no longer own. And it wouldn't limit our, the use of them if we tried to sell, so.
Which one is it?
Uh,
Which one am I missing?
Right, we still owe on outstanding projects.
So if we still owe on the projects, if we still owe on the projects, it would limit who. And we wanted to sell, it would limit to who we could sell the building to and what that use, the use of its building. If we did a taxable lease purchase, if we did a non-taxable lease purchase, the percentage will be higher. Do you remember me talking to you about the difference between
Yeah.
taxable and
Yes.
the increase? So I just want us to, I mean, we can go 17 years, but we want to think about not being able to sell those buildings in the event that we have new buildings, or at least restricting the use of.
Right.
Yep.
So what is that total?
All right, so these are only energy projects again.
Yeah.
The column 3 is a 10-year note at the same percentage rate. So it brought it from, let's see, 172,463 to 257,965.
It's a better price.
Again, yeah, Sean.
So when you give your report to us, as you're talking about things like, you know, the doors that need to be replaced, is that also like the door budget access controls? Is that all encompassing with like the door recommendations that you made to us?
So
or
it's,
Is that there's
right, so
something else?
it's not all of them. So it is prepping the doors for access controls, so that's like a phase 1 piece. So in there are door controls that are in access control upgrades, say Helen Thompson. Access controls for LER, Pittston. Yeah, it looks like all. So the first line that says all buildings, door budget access control, so that's hardware. That's to make sure that the latches are the proper latches and those sort of items.
So that's not actually like replacing any of those doors that need to be replaced?
Right, so that's not an energy project, so it wouldn't be able to fall underneath, which Andrea can talk more about the financing end of it for sure.
Well, the reason why we're lumping them into energy projects and other projects is that there's a carve out in statute for energy projects that basically the project doesn't have to be approved by the commissioner and by voters.
Right.
And the carve out is that it's entirely an energy project. So that is why it's going to tell us, based on the projects that you select, which path we're going to have to take. If you choose projects that are not included, that are not considered to be energy projects, we're going to have this project approved by voters. So we'll have to go out to referendum, and then before that, it will need to be approved by the commissioner. And we'll have to go through another bidding process. So it's just a different path. So it depends on the board's preference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the funding path that you choose to go with, I mean, that's up to you, whether, you know, I mean, we can capture all of the energy project together in one, in a grouping of projects. That doesn't mean we can't do another group of projects that are, say, you know, access controls, those sort of items in a separate funding separately.
Right.
So, I mean, however, you know, it's decided to do it, something needs to be done. And there's so many projects, and I know it's a huge list. I think it would be good to go through the list and really dive into it. And again, you know, we can look at the priorities and try to separate them all out. At least I am able now to use this software and show you the different pieces. If you had questions, I can easily pull it up and look at it and throw something together and see what it looks like.
Like if we were to say, you know, let's, do column 3 and the door budget access controls.
Right,
You can
right.
link that into that.
We can link it
Right.
together,
You can
and then we can look at the two different
Yeah.
funding sources.
Yeah.
And separate it out, and, you know, one's one, one's the other. Yes, interest rates may be different, or
Well, and interest rates,
even
will
if
be,
we looked at it per school,
Yep.
however we broke it down by school, however, you know, you want to do it. I mean, obviously, the energy savings from the priority 1, most of those are what we just did at the middle school, it's the lighting projects. And those incentives, this is pretty much the end. We will not be getting those incentives, so those savings will be going away extremely quick if we don't capture those. So that's my word. I mean, if anybody's walked into the middle school and seen the new lights compared to what was there before, it's a dramatic difference.
Are you
Definitely.
seeing a difference in the electric bill at the middle
We-
school?
we haven't
Or is
really-
it too soon?
I think it's too soon. We really haven't pulled those. And especially we just finalized the programming less than a month ago. And even that we can tweak. Right now, everything's on at 90%. And then it's on, if there's no movement for 30 minutes, they go down to 50%. And then if there's no movement for 10 minutes, it goes down to like 10%. So there's stages that it goes down.
My concern is that there's such a large difference between funding for 10 and 17 years.
Sure.
And it would be, honestly, it's knowing whether or not we've made the state list. And I understand that, that some of the rebates are going away. But if we weren't on the list, and we knew we weren't on the list, I would rather fund for 17 years. I think we're gonna have another difficult budget year. It's different knowing going into this, you know, if we're going to have a new school on the end.
And I mean, I totally get it. I do totally get it.
And everyone, you know, the board may decide to hold on for those very reasons.
Yeah.
It's just if that's the decision, it's understanding that it's gonna be another year out before any of the work can be done, right? So it's another summer, a future summer. And that EMC, with the way they work, they have not charged us anything. We would need to pay them. I think the contract amount was $30,000. So we would have to be prepared to cut them a check for that.
But if we knew that we were getting schools in 10 years, I think it might be easier for us to pick and choose which projects we want, the board, the finance committee, which projects it wanted to undertake and which schools, knowing that in, 11 years, we won't have this school.
Which is one of the goals.
So many things.
Yeah.
So many things.
Timing is
And I know,
perfect.
and I know.
And it puts it
And
off
there are
another
good,
year.
there are a good number of items that are on this list that are targeted in our regular capital improvement list, sure. I mean, it was meant, I have roof projects that are in our capital improvement that I went over that I already put into the budget for next year coming out, that are in the phase one. So those items were being rolled out. We kept them in our budget.
Right.
Can someone explain to me the importance? I mean, I know that they assigned the phase and importance
Yep.
levels,
Sure.
but like the access controls are more important than, improving the doors themselves. Because
Yeah,
I'm having like
yeah.
energy efficiencies with the doors and issues with the doors themselves, like.
Yeah. I think some of those items talking with them, we already had it put into our budget to do door replacements.
Mhm.
So they didn't look at that as a high priority if they do the door
Okay.
controls, and we kept it in our budget. And both of those kind of get washed out of the list.
Cancel
And we
each
just-
other out.
Right, they cancel
Yeah.
themselves out, and we deselected and we can put it as completed and done, so it doesn't factor in on the list. Yep, yeah, so it's been some communication back and forth, and when they made the list to look at some priorities, access controls, there are so many keys out there.
Right.
And it's really difficult with making sure the proper people are going in and out of our buildings when there are so many keys out there.
And how many years have we been talking about that?
We have, and really, I mean, you go to most schools and they have key cards to go in, they have access controls at a lot of facilities.
That you can change any day.
And we can deny access, we can give access, I could, if I had a contractor going in on a Monday and it was a holiday, he can have access for that one day and that's it. So it's really a secure, safe.
And in the times we're living, it's really important to have
Yeah.
that kind of security.
Yes. So sometimes those safety items outweigh an energy saving
Right.
measure on one end. As me and Andrea know, we've been doing these projects for a long time, and sometimes the savings that they say they're going to save doesn't always completely compute, especially with higher energy costs. They're trying to guess what the cost of electricity is gonna be in,
Right.
5 to 10 years, and it's almost impossible. So it is difficult, so sometimes you don't see as great a savings as they might say we do.
Any way we can get this, printout?
Anyway, what?
Cause it, we're missing some of it here, right?
Now, so the sheet that you see there is all of the separate phases that they looked at the different phases, phase 1 through, I believe it's.
Okay, you don't have the 7 items broken down here, that's all.
No,
All right,
but yeah, it may be easier, if we were able to look, or if I was able to print this off in the list of 167 items maybe, and I could always print it off that way. And people could look, but I know
I think I turned into a pumpkin at 7.
it's
Okay.
a lot.
I love orange.
The only other benefit to waiting until the school construction list would be to know whether or not we would be able to whether or not we would use tax exempt lease purchase, which is a much more favorable rate versus a taxable rate. The rate that you are using there is I would consider it to be a tax exempt lease purchase, and again,
Yes, and that's what they based it on. You're
Yep.
Correct.
so, if we do a longer term and we own the buildings, then basically a tax exempt lease purchase, which is the more favorable rate, restricts our hands as far as use and our ability to pay it off.
Yep.
So there's a lot of, from where I sit, there's a lot of benefit for us to wait and see whether or not we've made the school construction list. And I agree, there are a lot of projects here that I would very much like to do, but I'm looking at the amount that's going to get thrown in our budget
Sure.
for the next 10 or 17 years.
I don't disagree with anyone. Just keep in mind that if the district is not selected for any of its school construction projects and you wait, the $80,000 rebate will be gone. So there's an additional cost now for this that will have to be borne by the taxpayers.
When does that rebate go away? Sorry.
It's,
So
they
that's
listed as
That's based
26,
on
it's gonna be
this-
done.
This, what's available right now.
Yeah.
So
But it's,
what if we did just enough to get the rebate
Yeah.
and then hold off until we know where we are on the list, if we're on the list?
that's what we're looking
that's what we're
at,
looking to
that's
do.
what he just
Right.
showed
Pretty
with the
much
2
the
million.
Right,
seven items.
Yeah.
right.
Well, I
That
think
gets
we
you to
even look at
80,000.
Cause I also agree with what Andrew, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I also agree with what Andrea is saying, that we wanna wanna know if we're on the list. That's
You know,
important.
I think we look at the list of 7 things and see, do we need to prioritize these 7 and
Right.
that. But. When, we're going to need it within the 10 years anyways.
I think if we end up doing a taxable lease, the additional interest that you will pay will make that $80,000 appear like small potatoes. It's that, on a significant project, the rebates, you'll pay more in interest than you would see in rebate.
And what
But
do you
the
think the
quality
difference will
of-
be with the interest?
Again, depending upon the number of projects, but it's a significant increase between the taxable and the tax exempt rate.
Sorry, to cut you off.
I have a question. Can we change the rate of the term to say 13 years?
So you can do whatever you want, however, we can ask the bank to do whatever we ask. It's if we're on the school construction list, the amount of time that we're going to have to hang on to these buildings and continue to pay on these projects after we're in new schools And if we do a tax exempt lease, it restricts who we're able to sell the building to, so our hands are tied. So,
The thing is even if we are on the list, we have to be chosen off the list. And then it's gonna be at least 10 years before the projects are completed. That was my
It will
understanding.
depend. If you were number one, if we were number one, then maybe we're looking at 6 to 8 years, right? And the community has to approve it. I mean, there's a long process. But if you're not number one, you're not number two, you're going to have to wait for funding. There was one school district that opened, I think, last year for a brand new high school, and they were at the beginning of the list, and it took them 12 years to actually physically walk into a new school, so.
I guess my second question then is can, if we were on the list 2 or 3 down and it took the 10 years, could we pay a lump sum to pay off the 3 years?
not if it's a tax exempt lease at the higher rate, perhaps depending upon the terms. The other thing that I wanted to mention in the MEPRI report, I think one of the recommendations was being able to turn these projects around sooner than what they are currently turning around these school construction projects. That they can't wait 10 years for everybody to be on the list. That is part of the MEPRI report. So who knows if they're going to try to make a change so that they're turning projects around faster than what they have in the past.
Yeah, and I think one of the proposals is that renovation money, right? I mean, we use the renovation fund to get rid of, to replace some of the flooring at the high school, right? Some of the asbestos flooring, and that has been capped historically, it's at 1 million, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a proposal that could be increased pretty significantly, and if they were to increase that significantly, it would reduce the number of school districts putting in requests for new schools, right? Because right now, your only option is a new school. So that in itself could help speed up the amount of time in which a community could get approval for a new school construction.
When would we learn if we're on the list?
June. We were told by June.
Yep.
Yep.
Nope.
No, I'm pretty sure it's June.
It is June.
The problem, if we wait until June, you will not have a project done this summer.
Correct.
So there's the rub, right?
Correct.
The column I did, sorry, it's all the way over the side. That's again, these, all the way over, this is lights only. So if we only did the lighting upgrade projects. In there, what it was that was bumping up the cost was the C-wing renovations. New, the walls on the C-wing, new bookcases and heat ventilators. That,
Which,
I know.
Which are original to the building, right?
They're original, they're 65 years old, the heat pumps in that wing, and that's why we put it as a phase 1. That's part of, I mean, obviously there's energy savings with those. It's a huge, with the bookcases and unit ventilators. So it'd be redoing the old unit ventilators.
It's
And it's a client
irresponsible
piece
to do
to-
something.
It's the old part of the building. Again, I know it's a big piece. So if that portion wasn't done and we only did the lights. So now we're talking 109,000 on a 10-year note. 9,000 a year. If we only did the upgrades.
It is irresponsible for us not to do something.
Well,
Something 60 years.
again, I hate for us to, for one, waste the rebates and have to pay $30,000 on top of it all and have a potential of losing all the rebates. So this gets us still all the rebates. It gets our foot in the door, I guess, starting on, and if it is a 10-year note, again, understanding that the interest on that note on this form is 410. Andrea, would it help if we change that? What do you think?
And then if we're on the list.
I don't know, interest rates are
I
changing.
know, and that's, we had that discussion, that they definitely are in flux.
Was that the second column? No, we were looking at.
Sorry, Jeff, that's
Third.
column 4, it's the one all the way over, this is lighting only, column 4, I know, it's still pretty hard to see it there. And the center one, column 3, is energy projects, phase 1, lighting and
Are we all?
high school
Are we all
renovations for
finding?
Seaway.
How many of us are finding?
You're for, you who are finance. and
Okay.
You guys decide whether
Okay.
to take action, and it would go to the board as a recommendation.
Okay.
Is the, more just, is the rebate an instant rebate, or do you gotta mail it in with the receipt, or? When do
Like
you-
your light bulbs.
Yeah, when do you get?
It's a process, it
Yeah,
is, the rebate number that's on here, that's their number that they feel that they can get for rebates. When we did the middle school, it was the same way, they gave us the number, that's the number they basically stuck to.
Yeah.
Whether they got that full amount of rebates or not. There was quite a fight back and forth with efficiency main to get the full rebates. It's not easy, they do a lot of calculations, efficiency main comes in and actually oversees and looks at it and goes through all the numbers to make sure it's correct. But that's the number that they feel that they can get, so that would be the number we would give in rebate.
So I can add $125,000 to your budget for next year. I think the board is going to have another very difficult budget year. So we can put it in there and we'll see. I mean,
And while it wouldn't even be this project, it wouldn't need to go into next year's budget.
Right.
It would be the fall prior.
depends upon when the project is finished. If it is finished this year, if it's just lighting, I would need to make a payment this year.
You would, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Molly.
Sorry.
It's a fairly loaded question and I don't mean for it to be, but I have not been part of conversations about building schools. But what schools would we be looking to build? Say we're perfect. You know, we're
And-
number 1 on the list.
I think the 2 schools that will rate the highest will be the high school, Pittston Randolph, and then the middle school would be third.
Okay. And would we be looking to rebuild all 3?
Well, that is a
Is that-
conversation the board would have to have. The high school, I think so, yes. Pittston Randolph, you know, the board has also talked about consolidating into one school. And if you wanted to have that discussion with the Department of Education, I'm sure that they would do so. In terms of the high school, they are very interested in consolidation. If your numbers are going down, do you propose a middle school / high school, right? And then that way that opens up the middle school, and do you remodel that and make that a combined elementary? You know, as you just went through the ED 279, you asked the question, there's duplication of services. There's absolutely savings if you were to combine. But I'm not sure if that is something that the community would support or not, you know, so.
I think the community would support it if they understood how much money it could save in property tax.
I agree.
Okay, and that's the loaded part that I wasn't necessarily intending tonight, just trying to understand, like, prioritize a school
Right.
or, I mean, not.
There are a lot of unknowns at this time. And that's the hard part, and that's where I hear Andrea, I certainly do hear Andrea, there's a lot of unknowns. And if the finance committee wants to wait, because of those unknowns, certainly, then that's what you should do. It's just understanding that the rebates will be gone if you do that. You'll have to pay the money to EMC. And at some point, you do have to come back and really spend some time thinking about this, depending on the outcome of the construction list. Because there are needs in our schools.
Yeah, there are.
Did we authorize the more in-depth
The engineering.
engineering?
That's what thank you for bringing that up, because I was hoping we could have that conversation. Because, right, I don't think there was ever a definite answer that specified we can move forward on the engineering piece, which I would like to do. It's about $15,000 to $16,000 to move forward with the engineering. So definitely if it is something that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Whether we get all the engineering work done and then we do it in phases, do the work in phases. Again, phase 1, phase 2, definitely, I think that's definitely doable for sure, but we need to have the base work done by the engineer to see what we need to do first.
Well, there's always $30,000 in our budget for architect and engineering, so we could
Yep.
definitely use that for
Yep.
this year.
Yep.
I think the big game changer is when the budget is shared with the board.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
You know, when they see, especially in a year that we are actually losing subsidy.
When is the rebates, when are the rebates up again, or when are they not available again?
Once they run out of money, which will be
Oh,
soon.
soon, yeah, okay, right, like could be any time now, okay, like
These
now.
aren't even available now, is that
Right,
right?
I
so
mean-
the big piece, you can't even buy incandescent bulbs anymore.
Right,
So there's no drive for them to pay people to replace them.
sure,
Because they don't exist anyway. You have to buy LED or
yeah.
or high efficiency T8s. So if that drive's not there, there's no rebates. So this is
This is the last
literally
chance.
one of the last years, more than likely the last year, we will have to at least get the rebate money.
And that's still essentially a guarantee. At this point, is there a way
Depends
to know
when-
that?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to
that
Tom
is-
to make sure that, you know, if this is something we wanted to move forward, are those rebates guaranteed for, say, a summer project?
I would assume those rebates are through Efficiency Maine.
They are, they're efficiency
Maybe
rates.
we can reach out to them directly.
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I already have Tom's contact for Efficiency Maine, so I definitely can do that. Yeah, because we worked with him at the middle school directly, which was helpful.
So I know we're at
I know.
end time for some committee members and we need to wrap this up. So I think the question is for finance committee members, what direction can you give us? What do you want to do? And yes, can we move forward with that engineering study?
I think we should.
Move forward with engineering.
You think we do?
Yeah, we should move forward with the engineering study.
Yep.
I'd also make a recommendation to the board to do the energy saving costs that we take care of that rebate, because then also too, we were saying, what was that, 30,000 for Maine, for the company if we don't do anything at all, so it's like, you know, we might as well take advantage of the rebates while we can. And you know, get a bit of those energy savings while we can, that good governance and management is that, and not have to pay $30,000 for nothing. So that's my recommendation I pushed to the board, or that's my
So
motion.
just for the lighting portion,
Yeah,
is that
just for
what
the
you're?
lighting portion, and then also to do the engineering project is my recommendations at the moment.
So that's a motion.
That's a motion, yes.
I would second that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can we reach out to Tom to see if we paid the $30,000 and we just paused until after the school construction, whether they would allow us to apply that $30,000 to a project in the next 12 months?
Yeah, right, that's a good.
So that we don't lose the 30,000, but that we're not, again, we're looking at a potential of knowing, going into this, knowing how many years to finance and the better understanding of which projects we want to undertake and whether we're not on that, whether we are or aren't on that school construction list.
Are you saying in lieu of his motion? Are you asking to do that in addition or to add that to his motion?
I was just merely asking if somebody, if it would be okay with the board, if somebody reached out to Tom, that in lieu of moving forward with this now, reaching out to Tom to see if he would apply that amount to a project within the next 12 months and us just pausing I mean,
Well, I mean,
that
so I
too,
mean, my motion on the floor would still push it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking a question, but I mean, because it's still gonna be a while before we have the general board meeting. So it's like, I think you'd still have enough time to ask that question, so I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah, my worry would be losing, again, not to keep pressing on the rebates,
Well,
but to lose the rebates.
the difference between the taxable and the tax exempt rates over 10 years will eat any savings. So depending upon what we know, if we can do tax exempt lease,
Yep.
that 80,000 will be saved in interest costs. So while I understand the 80,000 being a hot button savings for you, it's not a savings if we have to do taxable as opposed to tax exempt. So I hear everyone.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. So I guess all those in favor, if there are no questions? 4, okay, that's unanimous. Okay, so you'll get back in touch with Tom. You'll check on the 30,000 and you'll check regarding tax exempt versus regular. Okay, future agenda items, budget. We're entering March.
Yep.
That's what we'll be doing, so there'll be a lot more meetings. In the future as a result, so.
So are we going to set a budget? Last year, I think we set a budget like a daily,
Daily?
Well, a weekly, like a Tuesday,
Tuesdays.
like every Tuesday. Do we want to talk about that now or? Because
No, I don't want to talk about it now, only because she's finalizing the budget right now. And that's what she's gonna be doing over this next week, so, until that's done, I mean, we need time to look at it, digest it, have some conversations with administration, so I don't yet know whether it's gonna be 3 weeks before we're able to put it in front of finance committee, 2 weeks, et cetera, so I'd rather hold off until we have a little more information, then we'll reach out and we'll start setting meetings.
So are we just planning to have our first finance meeting?
Right now, it's
Our
the
regular-
second
Yep,
Tuesday
okay.
in March. Yep. Great. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.